Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back in with you guys for another show, for another episode of our Tactical Breakdown series. Now this is of course the show in which we look at football matches from the Arsenal in a very different way to what you usually see here on YouTube, in which we break them down in a statistical and analytical way with the help of a few friendly faces, and this week is of course no difference. Now I know that you are probably still mourning Arsenal's result of 2-2 against Watford at Vicarage Road, and believe me, it has still been painful for myself, and I'm sure plenty of you as well, reeling from that result and trying to make sense of it. But we're going to try and do a little bit more to make sense of what really happened and see if we see some changes, because if we can identify the errors, we can see if something is actually happening between now, our next game, and of course the game against Villa at the weekend, to see if Emery is doing something to address these problems. But before we get into the video, if you are enjoying the series, please give it a like, please subscribe if you're new around here with those notifications on, and make sure that you are following our other two guys, Drew and Graham. This week Graham is here to help us out. No Drew unfortunately, but don't worry, because Graham is more than equipped to give you all the information that you possibly could need. So we're going to jump straight into the video talking about Watford. I'm actually going to throw to Graham immediately. Two inserts from Graham this week, and we're going to throw to his first one, where he's going to give you his first tactical highlight of what he saw going wrong against Watford.
Tom, for my piece this week, I'm going to talk about two things: the way we played off the ball, and also the way we played out from the back. Now, off the ball yesterday, he went with a 4-4-2 diamond. Obviously, with Lacazette not being available, he played Mesut Ozil at the front of the diamond, and he went with Ceballos, Guendouzi and Xhaka. I couldn't work out really whether it was a narrow diamond at times or whether Xhaka was at the base. I did think at times it was more narrow. The problem we had yesterday, I think, was the work rate off the ball. You had like Ozil, Pepe and Aubameyang, the front three, not working hard from the front. And I think the problem we got is that when the way he doesn't set us up well off the ball. So the moment we lose the ball, we're in trouble. And it doesn't matter how good the defenders are. And those defenders yesterday were woeful, Socrates and Luiz, in the errors they made. But the fact is that when you've got a team that's unstructured, the moment you lose the ball, it's not set up in a shape off the ball, you've got problems. And I think that's what happened yesterday. We didn't start too well. We obviously had a 2-goal lead at half time, but the moment that we made the mistake at the start of the second half, it capitulated and unravelled, and they overran us really because we weren't, I thought, set right off the ball when we lost the ball.
Now, off the ball was a real big issue for Arsenal. I think that the way we played off the ball ultimately cost us this game in the long run. Obviously, we're going to talk a little bit later on about playing out from the back. But in terms of playing off the ball, we opened up so much for space for Watford to run into, and Graham highlights that, and we're going to go through some of the graphics now to see this in action. So you can see on your screen now Gerard Deulofeu, who had an absolute field day on Sunday against Arsenal, was able to run into so much space, hardly ever challenged, often seeing players running away from them, allowing them to get close to the goal, and this was a real issue against Watford. Moving forwards again, Doucouré, not just Deulofeu, but Doucouré was having an absolute stormer of a day, able to run through the midfield. This is on a counter-attack at 2-1 in the 73rd minute. But just look at the amount of spaces available. You've got a 2-1 lead at this stage, and you're allowing Doucouré to have this much space to run into. You're committing too many players forward, and not enough people are getting back and are disciplined enough to be in the position that they need to deal with it in case we are hit. He runs, and he's able to run, as you can see, into the opposition half before them playing a ball. And that ball that he plays is unchallenged. Look at the players around Doucouré. They're not closing him down, they're standing off him, they're letting him play that pass. And this was a theme throughout the game against Watford. Again, the ball was on Doucouré. Torreira in this situation, running away from him, not closing him down, not putting him under pressure, not trying to create a mistake. And that's actually what led to Arsenal conceding the second goal and David Luiz conceding the penalty. Kolasinac doesn't close down Pereira. He's again going backwards. There's no one in the midfield that's on Pereira. Kolasinac is left exposed, and leading into a little bit further on this moment, he keeps his distance from Pereira. We talked about this on the show yesterday with the podcast with Webby and with John. And for me, David Luiz in this moment doesn't close down the player quick enough. He's got cover behind him to deal with those two Watford players, and he leaves Kolasinac on his own. There's another player, Firmino, in behind him that's also providing support, and there's no midfield backing Kolasinac up whatsoever. And it's in this moment here when Jan Matt, this Jan Matt in the scenario, is overlapping Pereira. It drags out Kolasinac, and because David Luiz hasn't come over early enough, it means that Pereira is easily able to take the ball away from Kolasinac, feed David Luiz into making a mistake by putting him on his wrong foot. He dangles a leg out, and it ultimately leads to a penalty. In this scenario, in the 88th minute at 2-2, being hit on the break, and Xhaka in this scene is actually in a sprint. We talked about this on the podcast, and myself and Webby disagreed on this, and he had a fair point. He thinks that Xhaka dealt with this fairly well in this scenario, running away, making space, realising the space between him and Ismaili Sarr, I believe it is, in this scenario isn't going to be made up by his pace, so keeping his distance and jockeying is fair enough. But for me, I just feel like he needs to be closer to the winger. I feel like he needs to be closer just in case that Ismaili Sarr puts a foot wrong, over dribbles it, kicks it too far in front of him, so he's easily able to do something about it. And he does not do anything when the cross danger does appear. He doesn't do anything to close it down. The cross goes in, and for me this is exactly a mirror of the goal which we scored against Newcastle, in which Ainsley Maitland-Niles was able to loft the ball over the Newcastle defence for Aubameyang. You can see there's a Watford player in the pitch who's in the middle of the pitch who's completely ready to take that ball, and we just allowed them all game to do this type of thing. Now we're going to move on a little bit and talk about what Xhaka said when he said that we are scared, which really did sort of anger a lot of players. And I want to talk about Xhaka's performance because for me it really wasn't good, and a lot of people said that he was by far not the worst player on the pitch, and maybe there is some credence in that. But if we have a look on the screen now, he made 10 forward passes in the game, and 3 of those passes went astray, and there were 2. So he had a 77% accuracy in terms of his forward passes, which isn't great, 77%. And those 3 passes were really, really key in positions on the pitch at times in the game when we really didn't need a mistake to be made. We needed composure. The first one is with a header. It should be going to Aubameyang, or it should be a cushion one down to Willock just in front of him, but instead it's rash. He panics and he plays it straight to the Watford midfielder, and that cost us situation. That cost us at 2-1 down, where we really need to be holding on to our lead, and he just put us under pressure. There's another one at 2-2 in the 90th minute. We were on a break here. This is a chance for us to win the game, and actually instead of playing that pass out to the wide right, he passes it straight to a Watford player, and he's got a chance to play the ball through for Guendouzi. He got the chance to hold the ball up, lay it off to Nelson, who's slightly left of him. Slightly further left is Kolasinac for a possible chance there, and he just rushes it, and he just makes rash decisions and silly forward passes, and that really cost us in that role. I don't want to spend too much time talking about Granit Xhaka because we did cover it a lot on the podcast. What I am going to do now is I'm going to throw back to Graham, who's going to talk about how playing out from the back ultimately cost us those 2 points.
I want to talk about the way we're playing out from the back. I think Emery, when he first came to Arsenal, had us playing out from the back, and he pretty quickly ditched it because it wasn't working. A lot of the criticism at the time was around the fact that Petr Cech couldn't play out from the back. But this year he's got Leno, the goalkeeper, but his problems are, I think, Socrates, who's not a ball-playing defender, and he was the one who made the mistake yesterday. And the moment you do that, and you concede a goal, you allow Watford straight back into the game. What I can understand yesterday was I've got no problems with trying to play out from the back at times, but why he didn't mix and match it, go long, better exit strategy, maybe playing out to Maitland-Niles on the right, or going long over the press to Aubameyang, and then playing for the second ball. The moment you're continually playing out from the back in the way Arsenal were, you're inviting the press, and I think the way to get around that is to mix it up a bit so they're not pressing from the front. But the moment we made that mistake, we were on the back foot. And then the other thing I just want to close with is in that last few minutes, we had 5 players in their penalty box when they broke away and won that penalty. And once again, they came too easy through the lines getting our back four. Yes, Luiz made a mistake, and yes, we've made more errors leading to goals in the last year, giving away more penalties than any team in the Premier League. But when you've got a midfield that's not set up right at the moment you lose the ball, you're in problems.
As always, a huge thanks to Graham for chipping in with his views, and you can find him on Twitter. The link is in the description, so you can go there if you want to go and follow Graham on Twitter. But let's focus on what he was talking about. The masters of our own downfall, I think it's fair to say, and playing out from the back with players which it's already been tried and failed with, as Graham brought up, by using Leno, thinking that it's going to change things when we already tried that with Leno, even though Petr Cech weren't a success, as Graham says. But Leno, it still didn't work because Socrates is not a ball-playing centre-back. David Luiz, more so, but more in the terms of kicking it long with his extra abilities with his long passing. Socrates, he cost us, and although he admitted it, it's not something that we can just skip over. Now we're going to look at some instances. You can see on your screen now where it starts. This is in the 5th minute. The ball is played out to Socrates here, and the Watford players know immediately what they need to do. You've got Deulofeu charging in, you've got other players on the pitch charging in, you've got their midfielders charging out wide to close down any passing lanes. And we just didn't learn. And we just didn't learn from this. And we just continued to pepper on with it. You can see in this one we played it out straight to Guendouzi, who is closed down by 4 Watford players in this moment, putting us under pressure, forcing mistakes. We should be forcing Watford into errors, not the other way around. And that is all that it led to on Sunday, was Arsenal being forced into mistakes, giving away possession in dangerous areas, in extremely dangerous areas we'll talk about in a second. But then we move on to when we actually managed to pass it out. Players like Ainsley Maitland-Niles had an absolute nightmare because their passing was so off. In this scenario here, we've managed to work it out. Leno has laid it out to Ainsley Maitland-Niles, and he just messes it up. He just completely messes this chance up here to play a decent pass in. And I don't know, and I'm not sure why we struggled so much with it, but we did. And it's very strange how this came to be, but it's the way that it worked. Pepe and Ainsley Maitland-Niles, both of them didn't really work on that side. Maitland-Niles was, as you can see here, overlapping. Maitland-Niles was Pepe in himself, didn't really get into the game as much, and the chemistry between those two is seemingly becoming more of a problem each week. And then we go on to the goal. It's so stupid talking about this because it's just basic. Leno plays the ball out to Socrates. Socrates then passes it out and it goes to, I'm not sure, it might be Deulofeu, and then it's obviously nicked off him when he gets a foot to it, straight to Cleverley, who then smashes it in. And this is in the second half. You're 2-0 up. You cannot afford to be making these errors. And Socrates, yes, apologised, but he's been told to do this. He's been told to continually try to play out from the back. And when you're caught between what instinct's telling you and what your manager's told you, you're caught in a middle ground. And that middle ground leads to errors. And that is ultimately what we saw. And that's pretty much everything that we wanted to talk about regarding this. There's so much from that game that we could talk about. We've only got a limited amount of time to do so. Please let us know in the comments what you think the key areas from the game, where we went wrong, and ultimately what needs to change. And I know it's very easy to say the manager, and we discussed that on yesterday's podcast if you want to go and check it out. But try and think tactically, what needs to change in this team? Formation-wise, what would you go for? Players-wise, who would you pick in different positions? Who needs to be cut? Who needs to be brought in? And with Lacazette out, we need to make some long-term changes moving forward till at least October to deal with that absence. And if it's this, I can't see it working. But I hope you've enjoyed the show, even though it's been a bit more of therapy for you, I'm sure. Thank you again to Graham for chipping in as always, and we'll see you again next week after the Aston Villa game for the next tactical breakdown. As I said, too much stuff goes on in the week to be doing it for midweek games, so for the Premier League games you can be assured that you'll find a tactical breakdown here as always, so subscribe if you want to see them every week. If you're enjoying them of our live shows, you need to turn those notifications on and you can get involved with those too. But I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, give it a like, and I'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.